So in this video, I want to tell you about a very simple rule, very easy to understand, and it can make a massive difference in the quality of your oil painting. So you've probably heard me talk about the 4 different workflows that I talk about for oil painting. We have a workflow for how to do your penciling, where we put in the 2 golden lines and then we measure and we plot, and we put in angle lines, etc. You've probably heard about my color mixing workflow, where you choose your color groups and then you mix all the colors for each one of those color groups, starting with the darkest, going to the lightest. And then I have 2 workflows for how to paint. And I divided into 2 workflows because they're 100% opposite of each other. The first one is what I call cover the canvas with paint, where you're doing a lot of color checking, whether you're working from life and using a color checker or whether you're putting spots on the laminated photograph. But you're doing a lot of color checking, and then you're using putting those colors where you see them on the canvas. This is the 3rd workflow. But you're not supposed to judge your work or even make any changes while you're working. And then once you get the canvas covered with paint for that particular object, plus a little background around the object, then you do the final workflow, which is what I call fix it, or actually, and I say it's 180 degrees because in the final workflow, you do nothing but judge your work and look for the value problems and make adjustments. Okay, so what is this new rule that is so powerful? And it's something that I think I only came up with this maybe a couple years ago, and I started teaching it when people take a private class from me here in Austin, and it's just like so simple. Okay, the rule is, now this is a rule that we use in the 3rd workflow, so meaning the cover the canvas with paint workflow. And that rule is simply, if the canvas is covered, you move on. Now, so why is that so powerful? Well, because this is exactly where everybody gets hung up. And it's the hardest thing for me to teach, and that is to do your color checking, lay in your patchwork of color, but you don't touch it, you don't play with it, you don't mess with it. If you've made a mistake, we'll fix it later. So, if the canvas is covered with paint, you move on. You move on to a place where it's not covered. And the other great thing about this rule is it's easy to understand. It's very difficult for people to follow it because they just can't help themselves. They see, I don't like that, and I want to poke at this, and I want to fix that, whatever it is. But the rule states, if the canvas is covered with paint, you move on. Now, another huge benefit to this rule is that, I get a lot of students that get stuck. They're starting to fill in, and all of a sudden they just feel like they just can't move on, or they just like, I don't like this, and I don't know what to do next. And I always say to them, the canvas is covered with paint, you move on. So I say to them, there's some blank canvas, that you haven't painted yet. Go do your color match, which might take a long time, and remember, most of your work when you're painting is done on your palette. So you adjust the color, you go to the spot where the canvas is not covered with paint, you finally get a good match on your source image or working from life, and then you go in and you fill in that little patchwork of color. So if the canvas is covered with paint, you move on, meaning you don't judge it, you don't fix it, and if we do any fixing, we'll do the fixing later. I'm telling you, if you can follow that one rule, you'll end up with paintings that are much more Sargent-esque, really, because that's really what a Sargent painting is. It's like a patchwork of color, and you don't want to, when you start doing this and you start blending and you start poking at your painting, that's when you ruin your shadows, you milk up your shadows, you overwork it, etc., etc., etc. And this is a rule that I personally started following when I'm doing my own paintings. I used to not do that when I was younger and I was doing portraits. I would fix things all the time instead of waiting until the canvas is covered, and then you discover, number one is I didn't need to do the fixing that I thought I needed to do. And secondly, you can really only judge your work from 7 feet away, and it means nothing what it looks like up close. All right, so just remember, write it on an index card and, stick it next to your canvas. When the canvas is covered with paint, you move on. Now, once the canvas is covered with paint for the entire object and some background around that object, then you can go in and do all the fixing you want. But while you're doing the canvas, covering the canvas part of it, once the canvas is covered with paint, you move on. Simple rule with massive effect on the quality of your work. So I can't emphasize enough, if you haven't tried it, try it for one painting. Just hold off all your desire to go in and fix and to play and to push things around, or I'm not happy with the way that looks. Leave that aside. Get the canvas covered with paint, doing deliberate color checking, being very careful with your color checking, lay in your patchwork, and then, and only then, go in and do your fixing. And if you haven't been to Geneva Fine Art, we are increasing. We've got a new purple. We've just lowered our prices across almost every one of our colors is now less expensive because we have a great team that's making our paint now. And I believe it's the best paint in the world. Has the highest pigment load, meaning you get great coverage with less paint. And it's also ready to use out of the tube. It already has the medium mixed into it. It does not have solvents in it, so it has no harmful fumes whatsoever. So if you haven't checked out Geneva Fine Art, go do that at genevafineart.com. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.